Hi, Hannah. Thank you so much for joining me today. For the listeners, welcome back to the Creative Mountain Mama podcast, your source for faith, family, and we'll be talking about homesteading today, as well as food security and leaning into a more self-sufficient life. Hannah Jo has the Prairie Mountain Homestead page, and we are going to get into a little bit about how she started, where we're going, and then how you can take some tips back to your home, whether you're urban or country. Thank you so much for joining me, Hannah. How are you?
Perfect. How are you? Thank you so much for having me. It's so fun to share my story and talk with other people who kind of resonate or kind of have similar stories. So it's nice. Thank you.
You, like me, were vegan at one point. Can you tell me a little bit about your journey from veganism to where you are now?
Yeah. So it's kind of all started with learning the differences between food and food labels when I got pregnant and had my daughter. I think a lot of people make that shift when they have children. And so for me, we lived in a food desert for a hot minute in Kansas with my husband's job. And that was a real awakening to the fact that we just couldn't get quality food there. And my mindset back then was very much towards organic and non-GMO because those were the only labels I kind of knew when my daughter was brand new. So we moved back to Idaho, thank God. And I was introduced with Whole Foods when it was decent at the time. And then we had a Trader Joe's that had organic produce, and they even had a local co-op, which I started to learn terms like pasture raised, heirloom, open pollinated, those kinds of things. And that was all still a little new to me because I didn't really have my eyes set on growing my own food until after we made the transition into veganism or a whole food plant-based lifestyle, because I was struggling with some severe weight gain after my pregnancy, and I didn't quite lose it like everyone said I would when I was breastfeeding fully on demand. And in fact, I was kind of gaining more. And now looking back, my body was in hibernation mode. It was not being fed on a cellular level. It wasn't being given the correct vitamins and nutrients at the right time of day for me, specifically. I do have some medical injuries that kind of took a toll on me and my body after having a baby. But I think the real thing was my tooth decay, and it was really frustrating. I love my smile. I am so happy with my teeth. I had braces for 5 years. It took a lot of work to get my teeth this nice. And for me to lose a lot of teeth in a short amount of time because of the tooth decay after having a baby and breastfeeding and thinking I was eating healthy, it was very difficult for me. It's still one of the things that I don't know how to describe it, but for the moms and the mom guilt, that pit in your stomach, that's what it still feels like. Even today, it's still a bit raw. And then my daughter started to have tooth decay. And a lot of people were very ignorant at the time, very much against breastfeeding at night. That creates cavities, yada, yada. And I just didn't buy into it because I knew I was doing right by my daughter. I just didn't understand what was going on. So fast forward a couple months, I shifted into a plant-based diet because someone on a mommy group just said, "Hey, have you ever tried juicing?" And I was like, "No, what the heck?" We were fortunate enough to purchase a juicer. So I bought my first Champion juicer, which was it's not a centrifugal juicer. It's more of a monologue juicer. So it goes kind of horizontal. It chewed the foods and veggies and fruit all down. And I was able to create these really disgusting juices at the time. I did not know what I was doing, and they were terrible. Kale and grapes, not a good combination. It's just not appealing. It's not satiating or satisfying at all. And I didn't change anything about my diet. I just juiced once a day in the morning. And at the end of the month, I lost, I think around 25, 30 pounds.
Wow.
And at that point, I thought, holy crap, what the heck is going on? Something is changing. obviously I need more veggies or juice or something like that. And that turned into the beginning of, I like to say now, the cult of veganism for me, because I was chasing a skinny, healthy, more energy, better libido lifestyle that fruits and veggies gave me. And I decided to start with the elimination diet, which we know now is just really not the best for your health, especially for women who are in their childbearing years. I cut out everything, started with red meat, then I took out chicken, then I took out fish, and then last was eggs and then dairy. So I kind of cut all of those, and then I was able to lose 85 pounds and get back to my pre-pregnancy weight. And I felt better. I could see my hip bones again. My boobs were significantly smaller. I could tell like everything with breastfeeding, and I continued to breastfeed through this entire experience as well. And I really just felt so good. 3 years into my plant-based diet, I had a GI attack, and I thought it was because of something else that was going on physically and mentally in my life. And so I kind of contributed that to, just PTSD or some kind of psychotraumatic, it's all in my head kind of a thing. But I was hospitalized and I had a natural home birth. And when I got to the hospital for a GI attack, I totally asked for morphine. It was so much pain. People who struggle with GI issues, it's no joke. So anyways, we continued forward with the vegan thing. I was at that time an influencer. I did YouTube videos and Instagram all about veganism and plants and blah, 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 until we got the alpha variant through 2019. And my daughter and I shifted into probably the worst gut issues ever. The foods that I had heavily consumed and that were really making my body thrive were in fact turning into allergies. I would get redness all over my face. I would get breakouts on my chest and on my back, and I didn't ever have acne like that before. I started having, probably too much information for some people who might be listening, but I started projectile vomiting and pooping profusely. It was just disgusting. And none of that was normal for me at all. But it was a telltale sign that something nasty was going on in my gut, and I did not know how to feed it properly. After my gut stuff kind of started to happen, I started taking some vegan probiotics and prebiotics, and I realized that the amount of seed oils that is in that were not helpful at all. And it's still taking me years to recover from all of that. And I'm just now realizing that seed oils are, in fact, way worse than sugar. And they are a huge contributor to high blood pressure. And I, having a medical injury, have chronic hypoglycemia and anemia. So that's not a good thing for me. It was just not a good picture. I think it just turned into this huge whirlwind of I'm on a high to then an immediate crash. And that kind of was the turning point a little bit for me, because I was not only seeing myself suffer and not being able to serve my family, but I was seeing my child suffer. And for any mom out there, it's just a huge hot fire under your ass to just get something to change. And for the first time in 8.5 years, I ate an egg. And then we made a chicken and I threw it away because I couldn't do it. So yeah, so that kind of was it's very long and dramatic, and I left out a whole bunch of things, but if you want me to elaborate, I totally can.
Well, it sounds like you kind of had to go there and, experience the hardships to get where you are now. And from one egg, can you tell me a little bit about like the animals you guys have? And now, you talked a little bit to me about finding the place that you live now and going in with like a homesteading goal. And what was that transition like?
Yeah, so both my husband and I grew up with animals, and we've always just kind of loved animals. And being a vegan for so long, you're always just hypersensitive to animals, and you want to have animals all around you. So My daughter thrives around animals as well. She just loves everything. And so we originally went into the snowball Dave Ramsey debt method. And we were doing that kind of in the last final years of being vegan and then transitioning into a more whole food, the entire whole food spectrum of a diet. Sure. And we automatically just knew that we would probably want chickens because they're good for compost. And we wanted goats because they're just so cute and they eat everything. So that's nice. And it would be kind of against the whole vegan mindset, but we could make goat milk soap. So we kind of had that in the back of in the back of my mind. And so when we started to look through all the properties in our area, we were very much phased out. Nothing against California and Washington residents, but them moving into the state of Idaho because it was a red state, they really blew up the housing market. And for people who have been here their whole life, it really kind of made us go into a county that we never even thought we would go towards. And so God kind of just continued to shift us a little bit more and more outside of the area that we intended to have. We really wanted anywhere from 5 to 10 acres. That was not ever going to happen in our price range. I mean, we had even contemplated getting those little sheds and converting it into a house just so that we could have the acreage. We even bought a trailer at one point and then realized it was going to cost us $55,000 down for a $125,000 drill for a well. And that was just not going to happen at all. I'm sorry. We're just not sitting on that cash because we don't have that equity of having and owning a home in a different state and then moving over to another state that has lower rates as far as everything when it comes to the housing market. So that was really difficult for us. I think we had to kind of squash a lot of assumptions. We had to squash a lot of dreams. We had to kind of come to the realization that we're either going to get a really nice house in the suburbs with absolutely no backyard, or we're going to get a POS with just a little bit of property way farther out. So my husband has to drive about 45 miles one way. It's 80, almost 90 miles each day to and from work. But that's where we are, and we have a small little acre here on the Idaho Prairie.
1 acre in the Idaho Prairie. And can you tell me a little bit about what you guys are able to do and what kind of animals you have right now?
Yeah, so we have, I think, about 30, 40 chicks, something around though. It's kind of always fluctuating, but we have a decent amount of chickens. We have about 12 ducks, 2 rabbits, and 2 dogs. So it's kind of a glorified backyard suburban homestead, but we make it work. We are transitioning into kind of rotational grazing. If you would have caught me like a month ago, I would have said we had a great partnership with our neighbors that we actually get to lease their property for putting our chickens out to pasture, but they just sold their house. And so that is coming to an end. So I'm not quite sure how it's going to work out with the new neighbors, but that was definitely an option for us the last couple of years. And it was really pretty. It was a great kind of relationship that we had with them. And so we were able to do lots of meat birds, and we wanted to do turkeys and geese this year, but I don't think that's going to happen. And honestly, I feel like where we're at right now is a really great stepping stone. We know what we want now. We know what we don't want. And we might just be transitioning into a season of finishing this house so we can move on to something bigger and better. But it's all kind of what God wants for our life. So we always have dreams and wishes and things, but we might be here for a bit longer. We have a very large garden. It is roughly around 10,000 square feet. And so it's pretty large, and I love being in the garden. It's definitely that, and the kitchen are some pretty happy places for me. So seed starting and gardening, and then just having chickens and eggs and meat birds is really just a great way to understand how much you can cultivate and grow even on a small scale. So even on an acre. And we haven't even broke the other half of our acre because we were using our neighbor's yard at the time. So it'll be interesting to see what we can do this year if by chance we don't get to use the neighboring property.
And how much are you guys able to, like, tell me about your food grown on the homestead, like amount, season, harvest, what does that look like?
So last year was a really odd year. We had some huge wins in the garden, and we had a great win in for meat birds. But then we kind of had it was a long season of just interesting weather. So for us in my area, our spring is very bipolar. So we do all of our meat birds at the end of summer and into fall. And so we butchered twice. We got 10 ducks, I believe, and ducks were new for us. I don't know if we're going to be doing that again. It's a very different process, and the meat is just completely different. And so I'm just not sure. I'm going to try a couple different ways on how to cook that. But we did get 10 of them, and they were all the drakes from what we hatched out. So I have a teeny tiny little incubator. It holds 25 eggs. I maybe get half of that to hatch. For the meat birds, we were able to get 50 birds in the freezer, and that was very, very easy for us. We put 25 in each of our tractors, which were 2 of them, and they are an 8x8. They fit perfectly. I think it's actually, excuse me, I'm so sorry, it's an 8x10. And they fit perfectly in there after they come out of the brooder up until harvest. And they were great. It's something that people can do literally in their backyard if they have enough space for them. Now, maybe they might not be able to do 50 birds, but they can do something. And the process of butchering and processing them was not as intense as I thought, even for an ex-vegan. I definitely think there were some things that were a little difficult for us, learning how to properly dispatch without any pain or suffering. It did take us a couple birds, but after that, we really got to work together as a family and put meat in the freezer. I was able to save all of the organs and use it for dog food because I'm not quite there yet, eating organs. I do take beef liver supplements, but not chicken livers right now. But yeah, and then last year was just a total hit on my tomatoes and peppers. We didn't have any. I think I harvested 1 pepper, and the tomatoes came in right before the frost. So they're all in the freezer downstairs. I did not can any of that. However, we had a huge amount of onions. I harvested about 1,000 onions last year and probably the same amount of garlic. Garlic and onion are one of the best and easiest things that I have grown. It did take me a year or 2 to kind of figure out how to do that in my area. But once we got that, I guess, idea of how it works on our property, it was good. And it's been a really big, like, I call it a cash crop. I'm not selling it, but that's a cash saving crop for me and my family. Garlic for us in our area, onions are kind of moderate. They can be kind of cheap or a little expensive if you're buying it organic, non-GMO. But that's something that I can take advantage of and do. Lettuce was not a really good year last year, and neither were the cucumbers. However, the 3 years prior to that, I was swimming in produce to the point where I was just giving away produce to my neighbors and or literally supplementing my chicken's feed with the amount of garden space. Yeah, you can really grow a lot of food. And I think if anyone's listening that's a new gardener, do not get hung up on the organic, non-GMO, the heirloom varieties. F1 hybrids can, in fact, be your friend when it comes to really learning how to grow food first, to then stepping into an heirloom variety and then saving seed for yourself. I think a lot of new homesteaders, myself included, got into this role of, I'm going to just do everything. And because your hands are in so many different facets of the homesteading life and dream and self-sufficiency aspect of a life, that you are kind of half-assing so many things. And I think that definitely has been something that we've learned the hard way because, I mean, gosh, when you get the keys to your apartment, I mean, we had chickens in our apartment. So while we were waiting for our house to sell, We just jumped right in there.
Is there anything that you found surprising that you weren't expecting?
Yes. I think the predators for us where we're at was a huge shock. And I think the death um, in any aspect is very much difficult. It could be because I'm an ex-vegan, maybe not. I think it's just because I have a love and respect for animals.
You're just
Um,
human.
I think I'm human. Yep. I really like them. And whether they are ending up on my plate or just my free range egg layers who give me really great manure, I think they should be treated the same. And the predators for us in our area has been the dogs, our neighbors' dogs. And we just were not expecting that. We were set up for aerial predators. We were expecting wolves, coyotes. The neighbor said sometimes when the winters are super hard, the bears come down here, but we haven't seen any of that. We had a run in with a coyote, no badgers, which we have badgers everywhere in this area, but it really is the neighbors' dogs. And so I think something that I just really did not expect was the relationships between our family and our neighbors and how much this lifestyle and growing your own food is just still so weird to other people.
That's crazy. The post that drew me to you was actually about chickens.
Okay.
And can you tell me a little bit about, what your background and research was?
Yeah. We went to, so the first ever experience was me little. My mom had some backyard chickens. We had horses. I did all the 4-H's that she said I could do. And then my husband grew up on a farm. And so we originally had animals in our mindset and our lifestyle, but the real like catalyst moment to where we wanted to get birds, even as a vegan, was when we traveled to Santa Rosa, California for the Baker Creek Heirloom Expo. We sat down and talked with this really amazing guy who did a chat or a conference talk or whatever in front of all these people, including us. And he just could not stop talking about how chickens are one of the underestimated birds, that they're not being utilized properly. No one is taking care of them in a kind of a Great Depression era mindset. We're just relying on feed to then feed the birds, to then give us eggs, to then feed ourselves. Like there were so many things that he was saying in there that for me as a vegan kind of rocked my world and kind of gave me a different perspective when it came to chickens. And so we left there really understanding chickens in a completely different mindset. And I think that's another reason why we wanted so much property, is because when you have a set like 5 acres or 3 acres, anywhere from 3 to 7 acres, you can grow a lot of food without the feed store. And where we're at now, we still rely on the feed store, yes, but we're able to make some of those small changes to kind of cut out that feed store bill. And so for us with chickens, it started, like I said, we bought the birds from McMurray Hatchery and they sent it to us. We had the chicks in our apartment for 3 weeks before we moved into our home. And I mean, what were they going to do? Kick us out? We were already moving. So whatever. Yeah. And so we got heirloom breeds that we could hatch out. We got one rooster and we named them all after Little House on the Prairie. We were just in it to win it. And we really learned how much chickens can either benefit the homestead or kind of financially disrupt them. We purchased some birds through another seller and we ended up getting Merrick's disease in our flock. And that was a real shock and frustrating time because we lost half of our birds. And so really understanding where you're purchasing your birds, how you're feeding them, what you're doing when it comes to like natural parasite prevention, things like that are all things that I don't believe we look into as much as we possibly should. So we came back from the Heirloom Expo. We knew exactly what birds that I wanted to raise and exactly why, the eggs, all of the things. And then it got me into ducks. And coming from someone who I have anemia issues and part of that is I can't process B vitamins properly, where if I take a supplement, I actually overdose on them, and then it gives me kind of some side effects that aren't really great. But I can consume duck eggs in larger portions, and duck eggs are a complete B protein. From the first to the last is a complete B protein, but they are so rich with their fertilizer. So duck poop is amazing for our fruit trees and our berries, versus chicken poop is really great for the vegetable garden. And we kind of utilize those in different ways. So our duck pool gets drained off near our berries and our trees, and then our chicken poop, where they're kind of rotational grazing and they're out on the entire back half of the acre right now because it's winter time. But we'll be modifying their tractor later so that we can harvest their poop a lot easier than we have been in the past couple of years. So yeah, chickens are a real asset for a homestead, and they definitely are the gateway drug to homesteading because they get you to research pretty much everything else that you really didn't kind of think of when you first just picked up the chicks from the store. So yeah.
Is there anything that, like, what do you grow on the property to feed them? And is there any parasite prevention plants?
Yeah, so oregano is a big one. I grow oregano and then I freeze dry it or I dehydrate it. Depends on what I'm wanting. Really, I just cut the entire plant right before winter and I hang it up in bushels and I just give it to them. They'll eat it. Oregano is really great for them. The other one is pumpkins and sunflower seeds. So we grow a couple different varieties of both. If anyone wants to jot them down, I highly recommend all of these varieties. So for the sunflowers, we grow Mammoth Giants and Mongolian Grays. They're both from Baker Creek seeds. You pretty much have to just kind of plant those. I would invest in a bunch of seed packets because you don't get much in there. But once you grow them for one season, you have enough seed for the next like 5 years. They are so prolific. I'm not joking you. I have a couple photos on Instagram of them and a couple videos with those sunflowers, but they are ginormous, like down to my torso area to my head. The sunflower is huge and they're actually really easy to harvest when you know what to look for. So I start them outside right after the frost in seed trays. So I make sure once they germinate, I know exactly where to plug them and I'm not disrupting their roots or making an area for us to like harden them off. Cause sunflowers are they're a little fickle when it comes to hardening off. So I start them outside in seed trays. I let everything be as natural as possible. And then I just transfer them over. They will grow up to, I had some get 18 feet last year. Those were the tallest ones that I ever grew, but typically they're around 10 to 12 feet. And then they will just start to wilt over, kind of like a cane. And it's so easy to just twist. You just twist their head and it pops right off. I hang them up in my garage and then they dry. We do have a bug. It's called a pincher bug or an earwig. It's kind of different all over the country. Those are kind of prominent in there. So I always grow way more than I need because also they feed the squirrels and it keeps the squirrels happy and out of my garden for other things. Squirrels can be a little frustrating. So I will hang up all of my sunflowers and then we were able to feed this year through December. And then last year, we actually were able to grow through January. And so I know kind of now how much sunflowers I need to grow. And really, it's not that many, especially if you're growing those really large, heavily seeded sunflowers. And I just love them. They're massively beautiful. They're brilliant to look at. Their foliage is so cool. I think the one thing that's really frustrating is once you cut the head of the sunflower, you kind of need to cut the stalk. And we've learned that the hard way the last 2 years because they're kind of hard once they harden off in the winter months. You come back and it's like a tree trunk. So I will note that for the first time gardeners of those. And then the pumpkins, totally underestimated. In the Spanish cultures and the Mexican cultures, they grow a ton of pumpkins to feed their flocks, their birds, and even their goats and cows through the winter months. And I think that it's so interesting for us to kind of utilize that as well and kind of use it on our homestead. Even though it's a smaller area, we grew a ton of pumpkins and we're still feeding it to our chickens. And then the other thing is just like an herb, a mash of herbs. I love to do calendula, oregano, thyme, garlic, onion, some wormswort. I think there's a ton of them in there. I should probably share about that because this year has been a very, very wet winter. It has not been freezing cold like it has been in the past. And I know we're going to have some parasite issues. And I just don't want to find any of those things in my eggs because I want, a superior food than the grocery store or, the farmer next over. So I do try to cultivate a lot of money into my chickens as wisely as I can because they can become a very expensive habit. But when you utilize them properly, I think they can feed you quite well.
And you said you're harvesting them at the end of every season, or you have been, right?
The chickens or the pumpkins?
Yeah. Chickens.
So the chickens, we do harvest them at the end because our springtime is this last year we had 80-degree April and then we had a frost in June. And it's just too cold for those teeny tiny little birds that just have their first feathers. Right. It's just too much. And so we just kind of stopped doing that. We do not do spring chicks at all. We just don't. Everyone loves it. It's the time for chicks. It is too cold for us. And I never know when it's going to snow or frost. We purchase our birds in June, July, and August, and we did September last year. And that worked really well for us. So we purchased them in June and then August. And last year specifically, the year before was a little different. And we got 2 harvests out of them. So I did both Cornish cross and the big red broilers from McMurray Hatchery. And I'm very, very shocked because we didn't ever grow Cornish crosses before. And I heard nothing but bad things. Either people loved them or they hate them. And I can totally see why. So what we did differently than a lot of other homesteaders or a lot of other backyard just wanting to butcher their own meat people is we actually did not free feed any of our birds. We don't free feed any of our meat birds at all. I ferment feed them. So I ferment the grains. I put some apple cider vinegar in there, raw milk, depends on what I have at the time. I do put a bunch of herbs in there to keep their parasites super low because I'm wanting to ingest that entire animal, not just their eggs. So I do treat them a little bit more and they do get a little bit more because I want better meat. I don't want a cheaper meat. I want a better meat. I am also really allergic to corn and soy that I found out. And so I don't feed my meat birds corn and soy. And I'm able to really ingest chicken. It's a very simple protein for my gut issues. And that's where I'm doing something very specific just for my needs selfishly. And my family enjoys it too. So it's a win-win. So what I'll do is I get scratch and peck feeds because they have a corn-free and a soy-free. I'm actually unable to purchase anything in my area. I've called people everywhere. They are just so determined that chickens always need corn and soy and that it's a complete protein and that they're going to be malnourished and they'll die or they'll decay or they'll get fatty liver or fatty heart syndrome. And it's just not the case. I dissected all of those birds myself with my daughter and we did not find anything funky except for a weird abnormal growth on one of them. And it was external. It wasn't internal. So other than that, I did not see any indication that any of my birds were sick or ill coming up to butcher. So, and it'll be interesting because we do plan on calling a couple of our layers just because they're getting up to the age that they can't live here for free. That's not what our farm is about. I only have so much money each month, right? So it'll be interesting to kind of cut them open and see kind of what we've got. Those will just turn into dog food. We don't eat our layers, but they do nourish our dogs. And it'll be interesting to see their organs and it'll be a good side-by-side comparison. So a lot of things that I've seen with Cornish cross versus the big reds or the Rhode Island reds or any type of heritage breed when it comes to meat birds is that you have a very sick, fat, overgrown Cornish cross and you have a very young, fully matured, but young, fresh, skinny, not enough breast meat, really thick thighs, or a heritage bird. And you have healthier organs on the heritage bird versus the kind of sick, fatty liver, very fatty heart syndrome Cornish cross. And I did not find that. I actually found that with a fermented feed and feeding them twice a day with lots of water and fresh pasture twice a day, excuse me, goodness. I created a very healthy bird and I feel good about that. So I will be doing Cornish cross and the big red broilers from McMurray Hatchery again this next year, because I feel like, one, it's such a learning experience for my followers. And two, we hope to have like maybe some classes here that we can invite some people that they can see the differences for newer homesteaders in my area, and that they can make a wise choice and an informed choice when it comes to purchasing the right meat birds for them and their families. And I just think it's so cool. I have been able to look at some other people online and looking at their birds when they are dissecting their Cornish crosses or processing their Cornish crosses, and they do look really fat. And I think we just have to come on, you have F1 hybrids that are not genetically modified, but they produce more cucumbers or more carrots. And, we have blenders that we use in the kitchen, and we have juicers, and we have modern fridges. We can take something that is crossbred or specifically bred for a larger breast and a quicker turnaround, and we can feed it something different, or we can put in something different and have a healthier outcome than what's typically found. And so we feed our Cornish crosses very high whole grains. I give them fermented feed, and they also go a week or two longer than if I were to feed them traditionally, like they're supposed to, just free fed. But I didn't have any birds that couldn't walk, that were so fat they couldn't walk. I didn't have any birds that died of heart failure. And I didn't have any birds that just, again, looked sick. Don't want to sound like a parrot, but looked sick when you cut them open. Because that's the last and worst thing I think you could probably have happen, besides them all getting eaten by a predator, is cutting it open and going, it smells bad, it looks bad, I don't even want to feed it to the dog.
So tell me a little bit about like the demands of the homestead and being a mama, both the sweet and the reality.
I will say it's been very eye-opening to understand kind of where children's worldviews come from. My daughter was raised vegan and knew nothing but veganism, or whole food plants, fruits. We mono-mealed, we juiced all the time. We had smoothies, crazy green smoothies, all that lifestyle, to then moving out here in the boonies with neighbors that either love us or hate us. There's not very many kids around here. She's homeschooled. We have extracurriculars for here. So anyone who's listening, she's not like under socialized or anything. Okay. That's completely different podcast for a different time. But she just thrived really, really well. There were some hard things, like the death is very difficult. We all cried when our rooster died. He was a really great, he was a Bielefelder or Belvedere. Everybody says it different, but he was a very beautiful, great rooster. And he died when we had the Merrick's disease kind of come through our flock, and we lost him. And that was terrible, because it's not only our friend and our rooster, but it's the protector of the flock. He procreated the next wave for the next year of meat and eggs. And it was just completely I don't know, it was just sad. We had some other deaths that just kind of hit us hard. Like I mentioned earlier, the death is just really difficult to get over, especially when you're putting so much effort into something. And it hits you not only like a waste of time, but it's a waste of life, and it's a waste of energy. It's just hard. She's had so much fun. She's doing 4-H. She's learning so much better. She's involved in the kitchen more. She just is thriving a lot. And I really encourage children or parents to just farm school, if ever possible, just to grow your kids up, learning how to grow food, learning how to be social, learning how to thrive with other people. I mean, they are children and it's good for them to be socialized with their peers, but at the same time that they're not going to be children forever. And it is really good for them to learn skills to be within the community and to also talk to your elders in a respectful manner with obviously healthy boundaries, obviously. But she took over the chicken butchering, and it was not we were not expecting that at all. We kind of expected her to watch a little bit, get grossed out and go inside. And I kind of came to the realization of that. But my hands, as small as they are, I could not for the life of me figure out how to get the lungs out of the chicken. And so she came in here with her tiny fingers and just scooped out all the lungs. And she was just cutting, pulling out, chopping off, all the things. She helped me cut them. She learned how to process her chicken, to kind of quarter out her chicken and piece out her chicken. It was really cool to see. And not only that, but she had a lot of pride, I think. It was a sad day. I don't think any homesteader goes into butchering day like, yay, it's butcher day. We get to kill all these birds and watch them bleed. It's terrible. But you can have pride at the end of the day that you know where the bird came from, what it ate, and how it died, and then be very prideful of where it ends up in your freezer to feed and nourish your family. And I think I saw that in her. I think it was sad, and it was a little hard for us to kind of get over that initial hump of culling them, of putting them down. But then afterwards, it was really cool. She has so many chores that she loves them. I don't have to tell her to go do the rabbits. I don't have to tell her to help me out. I just say, hey, we're doing chores now, and she's loving to go outside. Kids want to come over to her house and play because they don't have this at their house. And so that's kind of fun. And when she does have friends over, they do not want to leave because they are just inundated with everything farming. And it's also something that's just fun that I just don't think the culture today sees is learning procreation or reproduction, learning how to save seed, just a lot of things that children aren't observed in, or they do get that, but it's in a twisted, sickly level that children should not be exposed to. And so I think we have a good setup here. I think it's nice, and I like to see her growing in that way. So it's fun.
You have bought the soil, gathered the seeds, planted, facilitated reproduction in animals, all the way into harvesting both bird and plants. Does it get addicting?
Yeah.
Is that the real concern here? Is that it just gets totally addicting?
It totally does. I mean, you go through seasons. We had a really rough last three months of last year. They were really rough, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. We were kind of hit. I took a break from social media. I kind of needed to recoup. We got through Christmas. That was very much Christ-centered. That's kind of what we just dealt with. For gardeners and homesteaders, Christmas is for Christ. Seed starting season is really Christmas. Like, I get so joyful when I'm opening my seed packets and starting seeds and planning things out. And what do you want to do? What does she want to do? I mean, my daughter has made so many different maps for her goats, where she wants to plot them out, how much it's going to cost. I mean, all the things. We are just going crazy. And we're also just kind of in a season where like I mentioned earlier, I don't know if I'm going to have my neighbor's property anymore. So I don't know like how many birds we're going to be able to do, but I think it's still going to be something that we can experience this 1 acre that God has given us to the fullest and know exactly what we can and cannot handle. And I think over the last 4 years, we've definitely been handed that. And it is totally addicting. It's so hard, especially right now with all the bird flu craziness. It's so easy to just go out and buy more birds, but really I don't need any more. We're good. I feel confident in what I have. I feel good knowing that I can incubate, and I know that we have a rooster that can do his job, and we have rabbits that do so much for our garden. Yeah, it's just been super fun. I mean, my daughter wanted to get rabbits, and it was very much on her point that that was in her mind, but she wanted rabbits. And so she made a budget. She wrote up the tractors that she wanted because living in the house was not cutting it. And now she's able to kind of like harvest their poop and sell it. Rabbit manure is so beneficial to the garden. So if you're in an area where you cannot have chickens, I think meat rabbits and fertilizer rabbits are probably the way to go for sure, because they are so, I think in my perspective with my own reality, my own homestead, rabbits are very easy to take care of. The one thing that's difficult for them is they do get too hot in the winter, and they get too hot in the summer, excuse me, and their water freezes in the winter. And so that, I think, is our only issue, is you have to go out and crack their water, because they are a ruminant and they can colic. So there's that. But yeah, I think, I don't know, it's totally addicting. We want more. We want cows. I have so many dreams and aspirations, but I just don't know what God is going to have in store for us. So I think that's kind of what we wait for, is we know what we want, but I don't know what God wants for us. So we'll see. I don't know. But yeah, totally addicting.
And I think the point needs to be made in a crazy, like, foot down on the pedal in AI, and let's take this thing and let's run with it and let's be the top. And you have so many skills that don't require technology, and that is going to set you apart from everyone else. Let's learn how to code, and let's, learn how to prompt properly and all of those things. Super cool. And then also your daughter's learning how to be an entrepreneur and how to sell and set up and harvest. I don't know why I was getting teary-eyed when you were telling me she was taking over the harvest. Like, that's so cool. How many kids get that these days? And what a skill to have. She's clearly, good at it already, and that's already in her.
It was really good. Yeah, it really was. It was really great to look to view. And then, during we have a homeschool co-op, and she went crazy, and she ended up making all these products and selling them at little vendor markets. And it was really cool to kind of see her change. And yeah, I just encourage it for other parents. Like, there's tons of farms that will open up an opportunity for you to just drop your kids off or go do it with them. Go learn how to muck stalls and learn how to butcher a chicken, and, learn how to piece out a cow or half of a hog. Like, there's so many things out there that you kind of just have to look on Facebook Marketplace and see who's willing to allow you to come onto their property. Because I tell you, it's one thing to bond over something, but to bond over something like this, I feel like it's not primal. I don't want to say that, but I think it's just returning to basics that has been instilled in us that for the last couple generations have lost. And so we're bonding over different things nowadays, when we really should be bonding over the things that make us who we are. So food, our homes, our water, our community, learning how to serve others, learning how to be served, even though it's hard. Those are just things that I feel like a lot of people are missing these days. And I think myself included, it's really difficult. It's one thing to go on Instagram and say, who's with me? Let's go make a commune or a compound or something like that. And let's go build a Yellowstone or a homestead huge thing. And people are all ready to do it. But as soon as it comes down to actually putting your foot in front of the other and spending the money to do that, you'll find that not very many people want to. So finding the people that do actually want to do that it's really worth gold. It's really nice to have those relationships.
On the community side, definitely. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me a little bit about, and you spoke to it a little bit, how your faith fuels your decisions and your everyday approach and your journey?
Yes. The pandemic, or whatever people want to call it, the atrocity that happened for our country really kind of shifted us because we had this mindset of homesteading. And when that happened, we knew that that was for that time. It was for that occasion, for that issue that happened in our country. That's why we wanted to homestead. That's why we wanted to be able to preserve food and learn how to grow our own food and give to others. And so that really instilled a little bit of fear in me. And I went into prepping with I want to have all of this so that I can either trade, barter, or get through 6 months of food. And I think with that grew a lot of energy and dependence on, I need a homestead, I need a well off grid, I need a cellar, I need freezers, we need the generator, we have to have this garden, we have to have that, I have to grow these foods because they store better. I need to learn these skills, we need to have this much ammo. Like the list could go on. But really, when we moved here, I realized that my safety and my salvation did not depend on my homestead. It did not depend on how much food was downstairs. It did not depend on how much money we had saved up or, in specific bonds or stocks or whatever. None of that really actually matters. So my faith has kind of grown in a very different way that I didn't really think it would. But the way that I study the Bible is different. The way that I'm looking at the Bible is different. The way that I'm seeking Jesus is different. Because there's just something happening with the world. And I think people are being sifted. And I really think that it's so easy to get caught up in this mindset of homestead preparedness and homestead readiness and learning about all of these things. But in reality, we don't know how long we're going to be here. And what really matters is that we're sharing Christ with people, the real Jesus, who is fully God and fully man, who came here to die on the cross for both you and me. And that's what's really, really important. And so I think God has given me an outlook or a way to share what's kind of truer and natural in life that we're kind of not seeing. We have AI that does everything for us. We have Instagram that just portrays healthy, happy, lovely, beautiful, and doesn't talk about the ugly, the traumatizing, the sad, the scared, and even the waiting of life. And we have all of these things that we're kind of wrapping up into, this is what we need to be safe and secure. And the reality is we kind of only need Jesus. And it's not really what we have here on this earth. It's what we can do for him and how he can use us for his glory, not our glory. And then to move forward with that. And so, yeah, my faith has definitely shifted. It was full of gratitude when we came here and full of just amazing, just in awe of God and how he placed us here, because we purchased this home so quickly. And it was just so weird how he kind of opened and shut the doors and we just moved in super quick. And then to a point of, holy cow, we just demolished this whole house and now inflation is so high. So God, I need you to provide here because we need doors. We still need doors. And, we still have a bathroom that doesn't work. And I just now got the trim in my kitchen and living room. And then we went through a season of just full abundance, which was lots of garden, lots of preserving, lots of freezers full. And then to this last year, which was really difficult for us. We had a lot of loss. We lost some meat birds to the coyote. We had a lot of things going on in our family. We had just so much stuff that was kind of getting hit by everything. I kind of just had to throw up my hands and say, can't do it anymore. So you've got to kind of take control because I'm mentally losing it, So I don't know. And the more and more times I've talked with people, I think a lot of people are going through not exactly what I was going through, but I think they're being sifted. I think God is just slowly kind of refining us piece by piece for something specific that we don't know is going to happen in the future.
And we do know, right? If it is, this life is like smoke and it ends. We know that we're here to do exactly what you just did and share the gospel. And the good news is, if it is the end times, we're here not to prep and hold and harvest and like, oh, buckle down and, survive. We're actually here to be that last group that gets to meet Jesus here on earth. How cool is that? It's not scary. It's actually really good news. And I think so many people, to what you just said, have had that seed planted of let's homeschool, let's harvest, let's get chickens, let's live close to the earth, let's move out of the city and start and have faith and live in an RV for a while and build a barn dominium. And so many people are being called in this way. And it can be overwhelming to think of, well, we're being called this way because something is going to happen. We all have to buckle down. The good news is that happening is Jesus coming back. And what a cool thing to look forward to. That was my Bible study that I just joined. Is actually, let's talk about this. It's Max Lucado's What Happens Next. Let's get excited about this. So I love that conversation shift around that piece. And you can live a really, truly a good life and do things the right way. And Jesus still promises there'll be trial and tribulation and yucky stuff and death, and we're here for it. There's no getting out of it. And I love what you said about, I think that's what sets this format apart from other short feed social media is we can say, hey, this sucks. And that sucked. And life is actually really difficult. You get the conversation piece that you get to look at the good and the bad.
Absolutely. And I think, there are going to be people who just will not touch it with a 10-foot pole, but then I do get a part of my community who is like, thank you for being transparent. I actually was going to make that same mistake you were going to, and I'm glad that you shared it. And so that nourishes my soul kind of on a different level because it makes me feel like I'm not just talking to a bunch of random people. I'm talking to people who genuinely want something that I'm even striving for myself. And that if my mistakes is going to help someone else, that in turn will kind of feed why I'm even doing this. Because I go out and I look at what people are doing. And to be honest with you, it's great to know what people are buying for their seeds. I actually want to know what people are not buying. Like, what seed are you not growing? What are the things that you're not doing? Because it's so good to hear why they're not doing something. Homesteading is so different. Idaho has 4 different climates. The people in North Idaho are different from me in the valley, and the people in Southern and Eastern and Western, like we all have different climates. And so it's very interesting to see like what they're not doing and why, because it actually might benefit my area. And I think if for anyone who's listening and they're wanting to get into homesteading or they're wanting to just have a backyard garden, I would really encourage you to not just listen to what people are doing, but what they're not doing and the why that they're not doing. Because sometimes the mistakes are actually more beneficial and more deepened in wisdom than all of the fun things that people are doing.
Absolutely. And that's a good challenge for content creators, is diving into the hard stuff, sharing the mistakes, sharing the hardship. It's so beneficial for others. And then you're in that service position and not, just glorifying the good.
Absolutely.
So whether it's growing your first garden, looking into food security, and even questioning the systems we so easily rely on, I hope this conversation brought you some wisdom. Before we go, where can people find you and follow along with your journey?
Yeah, so thank you. I am Prairie Mountain Homestead on Instagram and on YouTube. And I think Prairie Homestead or Prairie Mountain on X, or yes, X. And so, but no, I really am just on Instagram and YouTube. I started up doing YouTube again. No more vegan videos, but it's going to be seed starting and homestead videos. So yeah, I'm excited to meet all of you guys. Definitely send me a message and we'll get to talking. It'll be fun.
Awesome. I'm excited for your YouTube and getting to see what seeds you're going to get going where you live. And for those of you listening, if you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend who needs to hear it. You can find many more resources on my blog and handmade goods at creativemountainmama.com. Don't forget to follow along on Instagram. Until next time, please keep building a life that's rooted in faith, family, and freedom. See y'all soon.